I will never forget the look on their faces the moment I walked into that grand house. Chandeliers sparkled above me. Polished floors gleamed like glass. And every eye turned toward me as if I had stumbled into a world where I didn't belong. I had barely crossed the threshold before I felt the heat of judgment. My dress was wrinkled, my shoes wet from the slush outside, and my hair clung to my forehead in damp strands. Hours earlier, I had looked presentable enough, maybe even elegant by my standards. But after what happened on the way there, I walked into that party looking like someone who had lost a fight with the storm. I had told myself it wouldn't matter, that people would understand if I explained, but I was wrong. The Harringtons, the family my son had married into, didn't see kindness or sacrifice. They only saw imperfection. Their cold stares pressed into me harder than the icy wind outside. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, glanced me up and down with a look so sharp it might as well have been a blade. I could see the silent plea in my son's eyes, too. That uneasy flicker of embarrassment he thought he was hiding. And then came the words soft, polite on the surface, but as cutting as any insult. Maybe it would be best if I stepped out. If I went home and returned once I was more presentable. I stood there, in the middle of their glittering Christmas party, with my heart pounding and my cheeks burning. The people around me shifted uncomfortably, sipping their champagne and pretending not to watch, though I knew they were hanging on every second of my humiliation. In that moment, I felt like an intruder in my own son's life. I had prepared for days to be accepted, to be part of this family celebration. And yet, with just a few icy glances and a single suggestion, I was being pushed out. But here's the truth I couldn't see then. As my throat tightened and I wondered whether I should leave quietly or force myself to stay that night, was not the end of my story. It was the beginning. I thought I was walking into a night of shame. But what I didn't know was that this Christmas party, this humiliation, would change the course of my life forever. When I look back now, I realize how small my life had become before that night. After my husband passed away 5 years ago, the house felt too large and too quiet. So I downsized into a modest apartment with thin walls and a view of the parking lot. I filled the space with what I could carry from the old house: some photo albums, Frank's chair, a kitchen table that bore the scratches of family dinners long gone. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me grounded. I lived simply, stretching my pension check to cover rent, groceries, and the occasional second-hand book that caught my eye. My son Brian was my pride. I had worked double shifts when he was young, saved every extra dollar to send him to good schools, and believed wholeheartedly that if I sacrificed enough, he would have the kind of life I could only dream of. And in many ways, he did. He married Melissa, a woman who came from a family that seemed to live on an entirely different planet from mine. The Harringtons weren't just wealthy. They were the kind of people who carried themselves as if their presence alone commanded a room. Every gathering at their estate felt like a staged photograph for a glossy magazine, polished silver, expensive wine, and conversations about vacations in places I'd only seen in travel brochures. At first, I tried to find my place in their world. I brought my homemade pies to family dinners, the same kind Brian had loved since childhood. But my pie sat untouched next to their catered desserts, gleaming under glass domes. I tried to share little stories about Brian as a boy, how he used to beg me to read him one more chapter before bed, how he'd grin with jelly smeared across his cheeks, but those stories landed like pebbles in a pond, sinking without a ripple. Melissa's polite smile always seemed just a shade too tight. Her compliments rehearsed, her patience thin. Over time, it became clear in their eyes. I was Brian's mother. Yes, but never an equal, never truly welcome. I remember one evening, seated at the far end of their dining table, listening as they spoke about investments, new art acquisitions, and exclusive charity galas. I nodded along, pretending to understand, while my hands rested on my lap, twisting a napkin for comfort. I felt invisible, as though the life I had built the years of teaching, the long nights holding my son while he cried after his father's death. The sacrifices that had carried us through meant nothing in that glittering room. And yet, I never stopped hoping. I told myself that if I just tried harder, if I presented myself better, perhaps they would see me as more than an afterthought. Brian always reassured me in his quiet way, though I could hear the strain in his voice. He wanted peace between the two worlds he lived in, mine and theirs. But peace often meant silence, and silence left me standing on the outside, smiling through the sting of being overlooked. For 3 years, that was my role, the polite guest. The tolerated mother-in-law, the woman who brought casseroles no one touched. Until that December, when an invitation arrived that felt different. The invitation came in the form of a phone call from Brian, his voice carrying that careful tone he always used when he was trying to reassure me. He said the Harringtons wanted me at their annual Christmas party this year. Not just an obligatory holiday dinner, not a last-minute courtesy call, an actual invitation to the event they considered the crown jewel of their family calendar. For a moment, I couldn't even respond. My throat tightened as if I had been holding my breath for 3 years. Brian insisted that Melissa's parents wanted me included, that maybe things were finally shifting. I clung to that hope like a lifeline. Maybe, at last, I'd be seen not as an embarrassment, but as part of the family. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't want to risk shattering the fragile possibility that this time might be different. From that moment, I treated the party like the most important exam of my life. I wanted everything about me to say I belong here. I spent hours at discount stores, searching through racks of dresses. I finally found one, a deep burgundy gown with just enough shimmer to look elegant without being flashy. It wasn't designer, but when I stood in front of the mirror under the harsh store lighting, I let myself believe it could pass. The shoes pinched my toes, but they matched perfectly, and for once, I didn't care about comfort. At night, I practiced conversation in front of my bathroom mirror. I rehearsed polite responses to questions I dreaded about where I lived, about my job history, about hobbies I didn't share with their world of country clubs and European vacations. I told myself I could be interesting enough, graceful enough, if I just kept my answers light. I even looked up articles about art exhibits and gardening clubs, imagining how I might contribute a thoughtful comment. For days, I felt a nervous excitement buzzing inside me, the way a child feels before the first day of school. I wanted so badly to pass this unspoken test, to show Melissa's family that I wasn't a burden to Brian, that I had value beyond the plain clothes and modest life they saw. I polished my jewelry, pressed my dress, and told myself again and again that this was my chance. Still, in the quiet moments, I couldn't silence the little whisper of doubt. Life has a way of unraveling even the best-laid plans. And I should have known, deep down, that no amount of preparation could protect me from what was waiting on the road ahead. The afternoon of the party, the storm came in faster than I expected. The sky had already darkened by the time I pulled onto the winding road that led to the Harrington estate. Ice clung to the branches, weighing them down until they bent and snapped. The roads were slick, my tires humming nervously against the frozen pavement. I kept glancing at the clock on the dashboard, watching the minutes slip by, each one making me later than I had planned. That was when I saw her, a figure standing beside a stalled car. the hood propped open, her breath a white cloud against the air. She wore a beautiful coat, clearly expensive, but no hat, no gloves. Her silver hair was damp with sleet. For a moment, I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and thought about driving past. After all, I had spent days preparing for this night. I couldn't afford to be even more delayed, and I certainly couldn't show up any less polished than I already felt. But my conscience wouldn't let me. I kept picturing my own mother, alone in the cold, waiting for someone to stop. I couldn't live with myself if I left this woman stranded, no matter what it cost me. So, I pulled over, slid on my gloves, and stepped out into the biting wind. The cold hit me like knives, and within minutes, the dampness had crept through my coat. My carefully styled hair wilted under the sleet, and I could feel mascara beginning to smudge under my eyes. I tried not to think about it. Instead, I focused on the problem in front of me. I wasn't a mechanic, but Frank had taught me enough about cars before he passed. I recognized the signs of corrosion on the battery terminals, and I remembered his old trick cola. I asked if she had any, and sure enough, she pulled a small bottle from her handbag. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh, two women in their best clothes, standing in a storm, pouring soda onto a car battery. But when the engine roared back to life, the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. She thanked me, her voice warm but measured, as if she were studying me, weighing something about who I was. By then, my dress was stained, my shoes soaked, and my hair a hopeless mess. I thought to myself that this party, my one chance to be accepted, was already ruined. I muttered something about maybe just going home, about how I couldn't possibly walk into that mansion like this. But she stopped me. Her words were calm, firm, and carried a weight that silenced my doubts. She said kindness mattered more than appearances, and if people couldn't see that, they weren't worth impressing. It wasn't until she reached into her purse and handed me her card that I realized who she was. Embossed letters spelled out a name I knew well, Evelyn Harrington. The matriarch. The woman I had heard Melissa dismiss as too old to matter, too quiet to influence anything. And yet, here she was, the one person in that family I had never met, staring at me with those sharp, discerning eyes. I climbed back into my car that evening, soaked, disheveled, and convinced I had ruined everything. What I didn't know was that stopping for her would change not just my night, but my entire life. When I followed Evelyn's car up the long driveway, I tried to tell myself that maybe I could still salvage the evening. The mansion glowed against the winter night, every window outlined with golden light, Christmas wreaths adorning each door. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed to open car doors, and laughter floated from the grand entryway. It was a scene straight out of a holiday magazine. And then there was me, damp, disheveled, with stains on my dress and hair plastered to my forehead. Walking through those doors felt like stepping onto a stage I was never meant to be on. The chandelier above scattered light across the polished marble floor, catching the shimmer of sequined gowns and tailored suits. Conversations faltered as soon as people noticed me. I could feel the pause in the room, that split second when everyone takes in the sight of the outsider before deciding how loudly to judge. Melissa's smile froze when she saw me. For a brief moment, I thought I detected horror, quickly replaced with the kind of tight politeness I had come to recognize. She leaned closer to Brian, her voice soft, but not soft enough. I knew that whisper was about me. His eyes flickered with the same mixture of embarrassment and helplessness I had seen too many times before. Guests shifted, trying not to stare, but staring all the same. Their eyes darted from my stained hemline to my frizzy hair, and then to one another, sharing quiet glances that spoke louder than words. I stood there, clutching my purse, praying for some small gesture of kindness that never came. The worst blow came when Richard, Melissa's father, finally stepped forward. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of tone that pretends to be welcoming while carving you down to size. He suggested ever so politely that I might be more comfortable if I took some time to freshen up, maybe go home and change before rejoining the party. The words landed like stones in my chest. He wasn't offering comfort. He was offering me a way out, a door to quietly disappear so they could go back to their perfect evening, without me there to tarnish it. In that moment, I felt stripped bare. Every sacrifice I had made as a mother, every ounce of effort I had poured into preparing for this night, it all collapsed under the weight of that single suggestion. I could feel my cheeks burning, my throat tightening. A dozen times I almost opened my mouth to excuse myself, to give them what they wanted, to vanish. I glanced toward Brian, hoping for some sign that he would step in, but his silence told me everything. He wasn't going to fight for me. Not here, not in front of them. I was alone. And so I stood there, surrounded by wealth and power, yet feeling poorer than I had in my entire life. I was one breath away from walking out when a voice, calm but cutting, sliced through the air. Just as I was ready to surrender, ready to turn and slip quietly out of that glittering room, Evelyn's voice rang out. It wasn't loud, but it carried a force that silenced every whisper. She spoke with the authority of someone who didn't need to shout to be heard. Someone accustomed to commanding respect simply by existing. She said that before I left. Perhaps everyone should know why I had arrived looking the way I did. Her words froze me in place. I felt the air shift, dozens of eyes snapping back toward her. She explained, with perfect clarity, that I had stopped on my way to the party to help her when she was stranded on the side of the road. She painted the scene with precision: the storm, the stalled car, the soda bottle trick that got the engine running again. She told them how I had ruined my appearance to make sure she wasn't left alone in the cold. And then she turned, those piercing blue eyes sweeping the room, asking how many of them would have done the same. How many would have risked their gowns, their carefully pressed tuxedos, their comfort, to help a stranger in need. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time all evening, I felt the weight shift off my shoulders and settle on theirs. I watched Melissa's expression tighten, her perfect smile faltering under her grandmother's words. Richard looked like someone had pulled the rug out from beneath him. The same people who had just moments earlier dismissed me as unworthy were now shifting in their shoes, their confidence shaken. And then came the revelation I never saw coming. Evelyn didn't just defend me. She reminded the entire family of who she was and what they owed her. She spoke of the early days, of starting the business from nothing but a loan and her determination. She told the room that while everyone believed her late husband had built the Harrington Empire, the truth was different. The truth was that she had built it herself, brick by brick, contract by contract, long before anyone thought a woman capable of such things. The room seemed to tilt as she spoke, the chandeliers above gleaming brighter as if to punctuate her words. She was calm, almost understated, but there was steel in her tone. She declared that the values that had built their family's fortune, hard work, resilience, and integrity were the very qualities she had seen in me that night on the roadside. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped entirely. Heads turned toward me. And I no longer felt like the intruder. I felt seen, not for the stains on my dress or the mess of my hair, but for my choices, my character, the kind of person I had always been. Standing there, I realized Evelyn wasn't just protecting me. She was reclaiming her own place, reminding her family and me that true power doesn't come from appearances or polished reputations. It comes from strength of character. And in that moment, everything began to change. As the room settled into silence after Evelyn's revelation, I thought that would be the end of it, that she had defended me, restored a little of my dignity, and that would be enough. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She looked directly at me, her eyes steady, and said she had been searching for someone like me. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. My instinct was to shrink back, to assume she was offering me nothing more than kind words. But then she spoke of the company, of the direction it had taken, and of her desire to return it to the values that had built it in the first place. She said my actions that night, choosing kindness over vanity, service over appearances, were exactly what her family and her business had forgotten. And then, as casually as if she were offering me another glass of champagne, she said she wanted me to join them, not as a guest, not as an afterthought, but as a consultant. She wanted me to help her restore those values inside Harrington Industries. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard her. Me, a widow living in a modest apartment. Someone who shopped at discount stores and counted every dollar. What could I possibly offer a billion-dollar company? The disbelief hit me harder than the humiliation ever had. I shook my head and tried to insist that I wasn't qualified. I had no business background, no polished resume that could match the people in that room. But Evelyn wouldn't hear of it. She said business skills could be taught, but integrity could not. She said what mattered most wasn't whether I had the right credentials, but whether I had the right heart. And that night, I had proven I did. In that instant, I felt the ground shift beneath me. All those years of feeling invisible, of being dismissed, of sitting at the far end of the table as if I didn't matter, they seemed to crumble. For the first time in years, I felt not only seen, but valued. I looked around that grand room, at the stunned faces of people who had spent years underestimating me. And I realized this was bigger than me. This wasn't just about earning their approval. This was about finally stepping into a space where I could make a difference. So, with my heart pounding and my voice unsteady, I said yes. Not because I felt worthy, but because maybe, just maybe, this was the moment I was meant to stop doubting myself. And as Evelyn smiled, I understood something powerful. I had walked into that party as an outsider, but I was walking out as something entirely different. Looking back, I realize how quickly life can turn on a single choice. That afternoon, when I pulled over on the side of a stormy road, I thought I was ruining my only chance to be accepted by my son's new family. I thought I was trading away appearances for something small and fleeting, helping a stranger. But that simple act changed everything. What I've learned is this: kindness is never wasted. It may not always be noticed right away. It may even cost you something in the moment: your time, your pride, your carefully made plans. But in the end, it has a way of circling back, of opening doors you never imagined. I went to that party believing I would be judged for my wrinkles, my worn shoes, my modest life. Instead, I left with something far more valuable than acceptance. I left with the knowledge that being true to who I am, flawed, ordinary, but willing to care, was enough. More than enough. If you take anything from my story, I hope it's this: never underestimate the power of small choices, of staying true to your values when it would be easier to walk away. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Has there been a moment in your life when an act of kindness changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. And if this touched you, Please like this video and subscribe so we can keep sharing these journeys. Together,